Hi, welcome back. This is the Sacrament of Deconstruction podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jonathan, here with my friend Katie. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Nice to be back after a longer break with some illness and just busy holiday time. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I think we both do want to apologize to anyone listening out there. No, it's been a longer than we would have liked break since our last episode. We have been dealing with illnesses on both sides of the mic. I've been dealing with holiday travel and stuff like that. So, again, do appreciate your patience with us. We are just two people doing this on the side for fun. So we got to fit it in where we can fit it in. So anyway, that brings us to today's topic, which we're going to spend some time talking about. We're struggling with a title for this one, and what we refer to this episode as right now may be different from when you listen to this on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. Our initial title that we had come up with was The Individualistic Circle Jerk of American Catholicism, and we decided that would be a little too snarky, maybe, and a little too off-putting. So rather than go with that, we're going to go with something different, maybe the privatization of faith, maybe the individualism of the American church, something like that, a little more sanitized. So hopefully any off-putting that happens later in the podcast. So, um, this is an episode I know that's kind of a bit of a passion project for Katie. So this is going to be a little bit more of a Katie focused episode. So I know that everyone will be excited to hear that, and less of Jonathan will be good. I do want to say I am coming off of an illness. So if I sound like shit, I am sorry. Doing the best I can here. So
you
as we
sound
talk,
better than I did
yes,
last
yes.
week.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, we had a trial run last week for this podcast and decided that it was going to be better for everybody if we just waited rather than try to assault everybody's ears.
That's harsh, but fair.
Well, it was pretty bad. Okay, let's get into it. So again, couple of context things. Again, this really is a podcast about deconstruction, and so this podcast may annoy people, it may piss people off, especially this topic. I feel like if you're one of those people that thinks that faith is purely personal and about your personal salvation and that Jesus is in your heart being the end goal, this is probably going to piss you off as well. Which, hey, give it a shot and see if by the end you're still pissed off, and leave us a comment and let us know how stupid we are. That would be just fine. But, as we talk about this, the ultimate, kind of our thesis, kind of our guiding statement for today is this idea that American Catholicism has absorbed some of the worst instincts of American individualism. There's a lot of great things about American individualism, a lot of what it's done for our country, our society, our world, but there's definitely some bad things as well. The church has absorbed a lot of those bad things, and it's really hollowed out the gospel and really, in my opinion anyways, leads to a lot of the dissatisfaction that we see within the church today. So, Katie, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that you're spot on as far as it's very unique, I think, for Americans just because we have such an individualistic society. We place a lot of value in individualism. I mean, anybody that's read Ayn Rand is like knows how much we value individualism. And I think that it has its place, but I think that it causes us to lose a lot of really what the gospel is trying to teach us and trying to relate to us. And I think that's really clear just in how basically faith has become very privatized. Yeah, like American Catholicism, it really just treats faith as a personal wellness project rather than something that's communal and world shaping. So those things are to me very problematic. You see this in like your homilies that you go to is very obvious. At least for me, I don't know if I've heard a good homily in a hot minute. um, they typically sound a lot like, oh, how to manage your stress, how to be a better version of yourself, how to find your purpose, just praying and better, all those things. Which I wouldn't say those are bad, but they are very like incomplete in the way that we should view Catholicism, should view faith, should take the gospel. I mean, I don't remember reading anything about Jesus talking about, how to be your best self or whatever. A lot of his works are all like focused on community, focused on helping others. And in the process, I think you find a lot of that joy in yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so Catholicism is not primarily about self-actualization, which is kind of what it feels like it's become, at least here. I think it's very prevalent in the West, especially like America, because we're a very privileged society for the most part. Like we don't, as much as we like to cry wolf and pretend like we're super persecuted, which I think is ridiculous, but that's a whole nother topic. I think that when we look at the way our society functions, I think it's pretty obvious that we're trying to just, ignore a lot of the real problems and just like focus on ourselves because it's just a lot easier. So, yeah, I mean, like the church doesn't exist to help you, cope with late stage capitalism. It exists to challenge it, which is really what it should do here. Like, I mean, Catholic literally means universal. It's not just like this individual believers that are kind of loosely affiliated with each other, which is, I think, what we view when we go to church. It's like, oh, yeah, like we're all kind of here, but we're all just focused on ourselves. And I'm like, is that really how it should be? And I mean, I say this as somebody that's not like a very outgoing person and doesn't really like to be like in big groups and stuff like that. Like I understand that, but and I'm not arguing that, it should feel like a country club either, which is something that like I've heard my dad say is like, I don't want church to feel like a country club. And I'm like, well, yes, I understand that.
But what does he
Especially
mean?
when
What is
I think well, I mean, he's pretty antisocial in general, but like he doesn't like this idea of feeling like I guess like the church is somewhere where you go to just, like hobnob with people and just like, chit chat and throw parties and things like that. Which I agree, like you're not meant to just have this like tiny little group of people that all just, throw parties or like stay in that community. Like if you think about it, that's not what even the apostles did or what the early church did. Like they all went out. Like that's the point is to go out and like find communities, find people that are in need of like this true gospel message. Not like in a corny way, but like in a way of like this is what we're trying to upend like the current order of things.
yeah.
um and really challenge like the status quo of what we experience, not just like function within it, because that's not what the early church did at all. I think I understand his critique too. Like, I don't want church to feel like a country club because it's all just like a circle jerk. Like everybody is, the same socioeconomic status. Everybody has generally the same boring ass problems. Like, which I'm not saying trying to belittle people's problems or anything, but like my problems very different are drastically different than somebody in like poor neighborhood. They just
Right.
are. And so I would not understand those challenges, those difficulties, those realities unless I put myself in those situations, which I think is what we're called to do. But like when you don't interact with those communities, when you don't interact with those people, it's really easy to just like insulate yourself into this really stale faith life, which I
Yeah.
think is kind of what's happened
Yeah.
in a
Well,
lot of ways.
and I think something that I was kind of reflecting on as we were preparing for our conversation today is that I think one of the ways that the American kind of system or mentality leached in was in kind of the same way that churches and public schools are funded. It's like your local community, right? Your public schools are funded based on property taxes, and if you are living in a very nice wealthy suburb of Dallas, Texas, with the giant $100 million football stadiums, your experience is going to be extremely different than someone like Katie said, living in the inner city, dealing with poverty, dealing with starvation. I mean, parishes are not dissimilar in my experience. Certainly the church has some, like Catholic charities and things like that. But, I've lived in some parishes that are less nice, and I've lived in some parishes that are quite nice and been around parishes that are quite nice. And it's interesting, like the types of conversations that happen in both of those spaces and, some of the just assumptions that happen in some of those spaces. It really, really makes you wish that there was more mingling, I guess you could say, or more focus on that universalist message. I mean, I think something that you had captured in your notes, Katie, is, the idea that, we're supposed to be the body of Christ, right? And that means that we're interconnected, we're mutually responsible for each other. And
Mhm.
this idea that like, hey, great if my hands are doing good, but my foot is bleeding. So,
Yeah.
we're not doing good if we're not all doing good. And I think that's something that gets lost. And I don't know, the history well enough to know if that is, because of the way that the church just developed in the US or what, but it does feel parallel a little bit to me anyway.
Yeah, I think we're just so focused on like this rugged individualism, and when you I mean like we've talked before, like when your political ideology really tries to shape your faith life, like in my opinion, like I don't really feel like any political ideology is going to be compatible with Catholicism. Like that's just really not the case. Do I think some are more compatible than others? Yes, but that is another story. But like when you hold so dearly to a political ideology, it makes it really difficult then to reconcile that with your faith. And so the way people are do that then is like they separate them and kind of just make it feel like, oh well, as long as I'm good with God, then or have Jesus in my heart, whatever, then I'm good. Like that's my faith life. It's very private, it's very focused on me, and it's not focused on what's going on out there, what's going on out in the world. Um, which isn't
Where does this show up? Like where do you feel like this shows up most?
which part, like, are you talking about as far as the
Well, the idea of how, Jesus, we're asking like, hey, is Jesus in your heart rather than is Jesus shaping how you live in the world? Like where does that show up in our lives or in the church or in just in America?
I mean, so I think the biggest part that it shows up is really in how we talk about sin. It's very obvious to me in how that is portrayed. And to me, like when I always thought about sin, like it was just sort of ingrained in me in like Catholic education, Catholic school, all that stuff. It's all very much like me. It's like what am I doing wrong? What are things I need to work on? And it was just very focused on personal sin, the individual. And like those to me were like the greatest sins. And as I've gotten older, I've just realized like, no, it's kind of like this is a little bit of a tangent, but like it's kind of like the idea of like, you know, you trying to use paper straws to help recycle when you're like, oh, okay, yeah, but corporations are over here literally causing most of the problem with as far as climate change, climate problems. Like, I was like, me using a paper straw isn't going to do jack shit if we don't change the way the whole system is structured. So, in a way, like, I'm not saying, like, yeah, you can use paper straw if that makes you feel good. You can recycle. Like, I'm not arguing against those things necessarily. I know you hate paper straws, though, but
I do. Yeah, side tangent. I'm glad you went on this tangent because I would like to the official position of Jonathan Baxter of the Sacrament of Deconstruction podcast is fuck paper straws. Like, not only is my straw living in wherever I am in America, not making it to the beaches to choke up the fucking turtles. But also, I'm not going to name names because I'm not going to try to get their army, but there's a certain celebrity who has a lot of money and they like to fly around on their private jet and they may or may not be engaged to a football player. Frankly, like if they're getting to fly across the state of Missouri every 20 minutes, you know what? I'll use a fucking plastic straw. Thank you. Big diatribe out of the way. I am anti paper straws for sure. But I think that's a great example though, because like it really does like focus on yourself. And I know I talked about last week, like my, quote unquote struggles with like pornography as a kid. And like, there's so much focus on that you're almost isolating yourself and you're not like leaning on your brothers and sisters that are supposed to be in the struggle with you. They kind of pay lip service to, oh, get an accountability buddy or whatever. But I feel like it's so, it's so limiting when it's just you.
yeah, I feel like it really just, I think it takes away a lot of the honestly, like, the responsibility of, like, the powers that be, which, I mean, yeah, like, if you just always focus things on, like, the individual, like, "Oh, yeah, like, we'll put it on the consumer to feel like they're, fixing climate change, but meanwhile, we're not gonna do anything about it." Like, or we're not gonna worry about, how terrible these economic policies are, but you can try to get that extra tax break for you. There's just so many things it's limiting real change. And when we focus solely on ourself, like, and I'm not sitting here saying like we should not focus on ourselves. We should just ignore our own like vices or anything like that. Like, obviously not. But when we don't paint a clear picture of just how deeply just wrong structural sin is and how damaging it is to all of us, I think we miss the mark. And like, I think that's where you see it a lot. Like, I mean, the church doesn't do a good job, at least in their homilies, to my experience. Like, I'm not saying it's easy to talk about this stuff, but I do think that we don't talk about it because it's just hard to talk about. I mean, it's easier to talk about sexual ethics and prayer habits and personal piety in your homilies, but it's pretty hard to talk about structural sin and things that harm like large groups of people, especially if you are not in the group of people that it is harming. You're not going to be receptive to it. Or trying to talk about sin that's baked into institutions and economies and policies. If you're not somebody that's affected by that sin, then why would you want to hear about it?
So, just to clarify, when you're talking about structural sin, I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? Is
Yeah.
those okay, so it is when it's baked into, like, institutions, economic policies, other policies. What are some examples of what you would term as structural sin? Or maybe what the church would term as structural sin?
So, I mean, it's not like it's not hard to find. It's just it's hard to hear about if you're only going to church and you don't really follow any like social justice people or entrench yourself in any social justice circles or teaching. But like exploitive labor practices, predatory capitalism, immigration systems that like I mean are really designed to dehumanize people. Like that is all over the news. If you don't see that, you are purposely naive. I mean, militarism, endless war, like, I mean, all things that I feel like America is very guilty of. I mean, we talked a little bit, yeah, about environmental destruction with paper straws, but like legit, like environmental destruction, not just these little things like the sea turtles and stuff, but like a global issue with it. I mean, and genocide, ethnic cleansing, we see that in Gaza, Darfur, like everywhere. It's not hard to see all these things that are deeply structural, and a lot of them are caused by greed and power that is just gone unchecked. And it's perpetuated by like fear. But these are all things that like are very much structural and they are evil, sinful, whatever you want to call it. And to pretend that we can't change that or that we just shouldn't voice our disgust of those things like is to me problematic and just it's very shallow. Like it makes the church seem like it doesn't really care, and it should care deeply because like you said, like these things affect parts of the body of Christ, which is all of us. Like it may not affect like yeah, the immigration issues may not affect me as a white woman, but it affects well, I mean, it will eventually when, like, yeah, we don't have anybody to pick our fruit or whatever, because that's what happens. Like, when you just deport all of the people that are doing the labor that we don't want to do. But the point is that, like, those things should still affect me and bother me because I care about other people. And the
Yep.
church cares about other people, or they should. So
Why do
that's
you
what I mean
think
by structural sin.
yeah, why do you think the church doesn't talk about this as much as it should?
I've been asking myself that question for a while. I mean, the short answer, I think, is that it is complex. It is hard to talk about. It's not easy. It is off-putting to a lot of people. I mean, it requires a decent amount of education on the subject. Like, you can't just go out here trying to talk about predatory capitalism and, labor practices that are unjust, but without like at least knowing how these systems function and like the harm they cause. But like it's not hard to do. It just takes more energy, and it takes putting yourself in uncomfortable situations because it demands people have empathy, which is something that is kind of lacking, or at least being even criminalized by people talking about it as toxic empathy, which I don't even
Right.
know what that is. I literally can't understand how empathy could be toxic, but
Yeah,
you know,
you care about people too much, I guess. I
yeah, I know. I'm like, shoot,
okay. Yep. Damn.
yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
But I mean, like at the end of the day, like bottom line, it implicates comfortable people because at least in like the church I go to and the churches that I've grown up in, like by and large, most of those people are comfortable. Like, I'm not saying they don't have their own problems or their own struggles. That's not what I'm like pointing at. But when you start talking about large systems of corruption or sin, like that's just baked into it. People that are in those pews listening to like talks or homilies like that are people that benefit from those systems. And they don't want to acknowledge that because, I mean, no one likes to feel like a piece of shit for, benefiting from something that is causing other people a lot of harm. Like, I have a problem even owning like Apple technology because I know that it is not completely, without predatory labor behind it and things that are largely unjust. Now, yeah, we could sit here all day and like talk about all the things that we consume and use that is harmful to somebody. It is almost impossible to not own something like that. But
Yeah,
at the
well,
end of
and
the day,
like
like we should still challenge it.
we should, but I also like I think that there's this idea of like kind of like going back to the paper straws thing. It's like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do, right? Like
Pray
there's
harder.
the well, pray harder, right? Um, there's the comic strip. I don't remember who created it, and so I'm sorry, but it's like the person making fun of this idea that you're going to criticize systems of power using those same systems that exist because that's what exists. And so the example in this web comic was like the peasants arguing about the king or whatever, and the person is like, I see, but you're participating in society while you do that. Curious. And it's the same people who are like, oh yeah, you're critiquing capitalism from your iPhone that was created. It's like, dog, these things exist, and like I can't change that, and kind of my joke has been, I've been a little more pessimistic about the way things are going in general. And it's like, for me, hey, if the plane's going down, like at least let me be sitting in first class. And so like I'm not I'm not exempt from this really individualistic way of thinking. And like, I recognize that in myself. And, I am comfortable. I have a job and we have a house and two cars and so I can understand how that would be really an inconvenient thing and something that a lot of people don't want to hear. I mean, I think we have to consider the financial incentive that the church has to keep people in the pews, right? Like
Yeah.
when, this is one of, I think that there are a lot of pros to having a separation of church and state. But if you could argue that there is a con, I think it is that, hey, the church is dependent on its message being popular for its funding. And I don't think it's an accident that you see these giant mega churches that don't challenge the status quo, that don't um, encourage their members to think about the poor and the outcast. Or maybe they do and they pay lip service to it and they do a food drive, where they donate a can of fucking green beans every Christmas and they think
And
that
then
that's some
take off
charity.
in their
Yeah.
then they
Which
take
like
off in their private jet.
right, exactly. And like just to like preempt if in case we get any comments about how like Christians give more to charity than anybody else or conservatives give more to charity than anybody else. Yeah, because churches are labeled charity and people who are right leaning in this country tend to be more religious. And so obviously if they're going to be tithing to their church, they're going to naturally give more than people who are not right leaning. So like miss me with that bullshit. Like I feel like people are generous or they're not generous. And this has been a big digression. I apologize. But like I think it's just super easy to see how it can be pernicious and how it can get you. One of the things that I know, kind of in the notes is this idea that this structural sin, and some people may be thinking, yeah, that just sounds like you're just a leftist, idiot who thinks that the church should be doing these things and getting into politics and the church needs to just stay out of politics. And I go back and forth on that. What bothers me personally is something you pointed out in your notes is this idea of like the selective politics. Like there are some things where the church can and should be in the public sphere and in the public domain, abortion, contraception, euthanasia, but everything else, preferential option for the poor,
Well,
exploitative labor practices, all these other aspects that are part of the rich tradition of Catholic social teaching, which I think is like, even as someone who is no longer Catholic, like I recognize that about my background is like, I came out of a church that has a strong history and tradition of these social justice programs. And to see them just like given oh, well, that's just prudential judgment. I don't have to believe in any of that shit. Pisses me off.
yeah, and like I think it's really frustrating to me because I'm like the church has no problem being political when it wants to be. You see it like with abortion, like there has been thousands, millions of dollars funded towards abortion legislation, which I honestly don't quite understand how that is okay and still allowing to claim that you're a church that isn't involved in politics. Like, side note, but we should 100% be taxing churches. I have such strong feelings about that. But that is, again, like a little
Yeah,
bit of a digression.
I could get on board with that, I think, too.
Coming back to it, like, it's not that the church isn't political. The church has no problem being political, funding lobbies for certain things that it deems are important: abortion, contraception, things that like harm like trans people, for legislation in that regard. Like anything that it thinks is a hot button issue, they'll put money towards it. But it's it's easier to do that, and you know that you're generally going to have support from at least a lot of like conservative Catholics. Like, it's not going to be an issue for them. So I wouldn't say the church isn't political. It is when it wants to be. But when you're challenging deeply entrenched systems that are rampant with abuse and inequality, it's just not going to be something that they're going to try to attack. To be fair, it is complicated, but I don't think the church is too stupid to be able to figure out ways to combat that. It's not something that I feel like is not worthy of talking about and standing up against. I mean, yeah, it's not no politics, it's just selective politics. And to me, like, if the gospel isn't challenging your way of life, then I guess I just don't understand what the point is. It's shouldn't just be, that's just too political all of a sudden.
So
Yeah, I mean,
where does that lead us then? Because I mean, like you said, if the gospel doesn't challenge your way of life, I think we can all recognize that. I mean, that was a big part of the gospel was Jesus challenging his
yeah.
followers and all that. So where does that leave us now if we're not doing that?
So, I mean, it just makes a selective moral view of Jesus that honestly is pretty harmless. It paints Jesus as a life coach. It really just American Catholicism domesticates Jesus. And I mean, when you do that, then Jesus is just going to be like, your source of inner peace, or your personal encourager, spiritual therapist, whatever you want to call it, like, which is kind of what I always felt like they were trying to teach us when they were trying to get us to pray, like, have a relationship with Jesus. I still, for the life of me, with all of my education, have no idea what that means. I am at a loss. Not good at praying. I'm not good at whatever, like, the supposed relationship with Jesus is. I recognize that is going to be very unpopular with people because that's how they understand their faith. It's just always been something that I've struggled with, which is why I've just leaned so heavily towards trying to figure it out through academics. Newsflash, it didn't work. So I don't know what the heck the next approach is. I always felt like I'm just not pious enough for this. So yeah, kind of a tangent there. But again, but that is what we want Jesus to be, is just like this personal, I don't know, like cheerleader for us, somebody that's going to be there to like hold our hand when things get tough and, keep us going, keep us accountable, keep us whatever, feeling good about ourselves. But that's not really who Jesus was at all. Like, Jesus, newsflash, didn't really talk much about sexual ethics at all. Like, he's out here, like, literally challenging systems of power. He challenged unjust systems, wealth hoarding, like, disrupted power, and they executed him for it.
Yeah, I think that's something that gets missed is when we sanitize them, like we have is, people don't just get executed for, saying, "Oh, hey, peace and love and, let's go," right? Like no one would have a problem with that. You can talk about, "Oh, the Roman Empire," this like no, they're not going to have a fucking problem with someone running around saying, "Hey, let's be nicer to each other." Like Jesus was executed and it was for political reasons. Like he
Yeah.
was challenging those systems of power. He was a threat to the established order, so they took him out. And I mean that's just according to the text that is presented and the best sources that we have. I mean, again, this presupposes that Jesus of Nazareth existed and all. I'm not a mythicist. I think that a person named Jesus of Nazareth existed and was most likely executed and all that. But like again, that
Well,
would have happened because of his challenge of power.
yeah. And this is even the early church is basically this way. Like, until the church is basically assimilated with the Roman Empire, like, when Constantine and everything, and becomes like the official religion, it was a threat constantly. And sometimes I feel like maybe it was better before it became basically a system of power because it lost a lot of, I think, what the true message was, which, is to challenge the status quo, not be the status quo. Like, so, I mean, yeah, I think if your faith is becoming just more like a lifestyle or like a personal identity marker, then it's not costing you anything. It's not meaningful. And if it
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything, then what's the point? Like it's just like this like thing I have on the side, like, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, or oh yeah, I'm, Christian or evangelical, whatever it is. Like it's like, okay, but how does that shape what you do in your everyday life? And like I feel like that's kind of a message that I may hear in church, but it's not given any like concrete examples of how we do that. And so we're never talking about unjust systems. We're never talking about solidarity with our brothers and sisters. We're never talking about redistribution or any like there's just no risk with it. It's all fairly comfortable
Mhm.
because I mean nobody wants to be uncomfortable. That's pretty obvious. But I mean, yeah, like if your faith is never putting you at odds with power, then you're probably not following Jesus, might just be using him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think that's something that happens quite a bit. And I think it's important too to recognize like we all exist within our context. And, both Katie and I, have similar contexts in terms of, our socioeconomic status. And, I mentioned I'm Hispanic, but I'm very, white passing. And so I don't have a lot of the same, issues or with racial discrimination that's going on with a lot of folks. But, I think that we are products of our environment. And part of that is what we've seen in the churches. And so, I mean, is this something that's going on everywhere in America, or are there pockets where this is better? Like, what does it look like?
So yeah, like I haven't actually seen much of it myself. I've seen I mean based other than just scrolling through, Instagram or YouTube and things and finding other content that talks about this, but it is you do see it in liberation theology, which is it's not this radical theology that I think some Catholics would like to think it is. I think it actually is deeply Catholic because it's rooted in Catholic social teaching, it's rooted in scripture and honestly the lived experience of the poor. You see it a lot in like black churches or even in like immigrant communities or just marginalized spaces because that's where things are they experience the sin of those structural systems. They're the ones that are victims of it. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to emphasize like yeah, your preferential option of the poor, which is a very Catholic teaching. It's not just, this side thing that like we had somebody come and talk about these poor kids in Venezuela. We'll give a few bucks for that. Like, no, it is literally like a very fundamental part of Catholic teaching. And so, like, it's really talking about like God's concern for the oppressed. So, like, salvation isn't so, it's salvation as like social transformation. It's not just this, lip service that like, we should change this or change that. It's literally like something that's supposed to threaten your comfort and challenge the economic systems. And it names the injustice that's happening very plainly. It refuses neutrality on our part. Like we can't just allow it to happen and just sit by and be like, oh, well, it's not affecting me, so it's not a big deal. Because again, we're all part of this body of Christ, and we can't just ignore the fact that the things that are happening to our brothers and sisters of color or our immigrant brothers and sisters, like we can't just ignore the fact that they are suffering deeply and at the hands of our government or our like social practices. Like all of these things, like it demands us to learn, it demands us to take a stand and to actually confront that evil and name it and voice against it. And not just like lip service, but actually go out and try to change these systems and make it known that we're not okay with the way that these things are like the thing right now.
So this idea of getting rid of the sins in these systems and the structural sin, like, what's the end result of that, right? I mean, like it almost sounds like you're saying that salvation is more than just I mean, like, again, in America, you think about like your own personal salvation, right? Whether it's, the Catholic view of you're right with God and you've gone to sacraments and all that when you pass
Mhm.
away, or, the more mainline Protestant view of accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, and you become saved and all that. But that's all very individual. So like, in your opinion, does
Yeah.
that mean that the church's view of salvation is less individualistic?
I think it should be, and I think it used to be. I think
Okay.
that it's gotten I don't know, I don't part of it also is, like, I have a very well, I don't think it's radical, but I think it would be considered radical for some people today, but, like, I don't feel like salvation in general is personal or individual. Like, this is a whole 'nother topic for another, like, podcast episode, but, like, I legitimately don't think that it makes sense for salvation to not encompass everyone. So yes, that makes me a bit of a universalist, I suppose, but like to me, it fundamentally just doesn't jive. But again, that's a whole nother episode. But in general, like I just don't think that you can view salvation as simply this individualistic thing. Like it's just you and God. Like because it's not just you and God, it's you and God and everybody else. So like, salvation isn't just about you, it's about reconciling all things, like, and that encompasses more than just individual souls, it encompasses this earth, this creation, all of it. Like, I mean, we talked about in my, theology program about how salvation was really meant to be, like, the making of a whole new earth, a whole new world, like, everything, not just, like, this, like, up in the clouds nonsense or whatever the heck that means. It's like, this earth, this everything, all of creation is going to be like restored to what it should be. And if we're looking at it like that, like I mean, one, that gives us a lot of incentive to actually care about the earth, climate change plug. But I mean, yeah, so I don't think that like classical Christianity really leans on this. It's like salvation is cosmic. It's not small, it's not individual. It's about like yeah, the healing of creation, the restoration of all things, all relationships, like everything. But instead we kind of get this lackluster modern view of it, which is very personal, it's very western um, and it's very much influenced by capitalism and individualism, which I think is our big critique is that they don't jive. Like they don't, you can't have both. I think we want both because again, it is comfortable, but I don't really think we can have both. I don't think that's going to work because if we lean into rugged individualism and capitalism, it ultimately harms somebody. We just may not see it. And that's kind of what I want to advocate for is for us to actually see how these things affect other people. And that's what the church should advocate for. And I don't think there's a lot of excuse for not seeing it now because I think that it's pretty easy to see. I think you can see it in really anywhere. If you just open up the news, there's no shortage of of terrible things happening right now. I think that it's getting harder for me to ignore people that or to accept when people just ignore these things when they're so apparent. The economy alone is hurting tons of people.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, again, like this isn't unfounded or like this some weird postmodern wannabe Christianity. Like this is early Christianity teaching. Like early Christianity was very socialist if you want to really talk about it. I mean like it was anti-imperial, it was very communal. Like people would travel to towns, they would stay with other people, they would give away their possessions. Like, there's some really radical quotes from church fathers that's basically saying, like, if you are not eating this bread, that belongs to somebody else. Like, you can't just hoard things and waste things. Like, it is very much like hoarding any type of resource, any type of good, any type of land, anything like that is basically, it does not belong to you. It belongs to the people. So,
Yeah.
the poor, the people that need it, like, those are it is very unsettling and it's very difficult to read, especially when you are comfortable. Like I read those things and I'm like, man, like I may not have like a second home or something like other people, but like it's still unsettling knowing like just how comfortable my life is and knowing that there are those out there that do not have that level of comfort
Yeah.
and recognizing that there are things that probably I do in my everyday life that contribute to harm, and maybe not intentionally. And that's the thing. I think some people hear these things and they view it as if it's very intentional. Like, and I don't think that's true. And I think that's sometimes where some leftists probably get it wrong, or like they feel like they're insulting, or they come off insulting to other people. Um, is because I think a lot of people are unaware of the things that they do in their everyday life that contribute to the harm of other people. Now, I'm not saying that's okay. I always think people need to educate themselves and be willing to be educated and corrected. And that is where I think a lot of the disconnect is, why people don't want to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, kind of something that we mentioned earlier, and I want to reemphasize, right? The church, Katie and I both are left leaning politically, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I don't think Katie is either. The church predates modern politics and concepts like socialism and capitalism and communism and, machines and guns and all the things that are, iPads that are part of modern life. Like the church developed and came about before that. So I think that something that systems of power have done since the church became a lever of power, since the church became an official part of the Roman Empire, is leverage the church to maintain their power. So this isn't something that's new. This isn't something, that's happening for the first time. I mean, people used the Bible to justify slavery for hundreds and thousands of years before it took some radicals to say, hey, maybe that's not what the Bible actually means. Maybe it is a liberatory message. And then that became the norm. So I think that for me, it's frustrating because it's like, like you said, Katie, everyone should take the time to educate themselves. Everyone should do these things. But ultimately, I think it falls on those in power, and I don't just mean like the president. I mean like those who have soft power, people listen to their pastors. People
Mhm.
listen to their bishops. People listen to their leaders. And if these leaders would have the stones to get out here and say, listen, motherfucker, yeah, we've been talking about abortion for 40 years, and yeah, that matters to them. But like these other things matter too. Until they have the stones to do that, I'm pessimistic about the future of the American church. I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse. But as
Yeah.
as we kind of wrap up, we've talked about, right, the church didn't just happen to become individualistic. It kind of absorbed the culture around it. But I guess, Katie, what closing thoughts do you have?
I mean, I think that you're right. I think that if we don't have people in power or people with influence speaking out about these things, then I'm not optimistic that a lot of things are going to change. I mean, I don't think people gave two shits about abortion 50 years ago, but we've preached about it so much that now it's like the only thing to care about. So surely we could, may take 50 years, but surely we could get people to, give a shit about the people that are already here that we can't feed or care for or, give any type of comfort to. But yeah, I think if we try to refuse this privatization of the gospel and of salvation and view everything as having more of a communal impact, I think that I think if that was the case, I would have a lot fewer issues and frustrations with the church. And I think a lot of young people would. Like, I don't think I'm alone in this. I think it's something that's very, very frustrating to people our age. I mean, even sometimes when I'm in church, it seems like there are less people in the pews. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but when I was a kid, it seemed like there was more. But even I can, count several people that we went to school with that I know no longer go to church. And that's fine. Like, I'm not here judging, like, but I feel like I've seen some of the reasons why they don't. Some of it is honestly, they just don't feel like they feel like the church is stale, it's stagnant. It doesn't preach about things that matter. It preaches about things that I guess are just honestly very private, personal, and just like, again, like a circle jerk. It's just like, and if it's not hurting you, then it's easy to push that blame on someone else. Like the reason why abortion is easy to talk about in a middle class white parish, because most of them do not face that challenge. Like, it's easy to place these other sins that are so terrible, whatever you wanna call it, when you are never in a position where you would choose that or feel like that was something that you would need to choose. Now, you go to some place where abortion is very much tempting because you're in a very difficult spot. I guarantee that that conversation is much harder. But when you can always shift the blame, shift the sin onto something else that makes you feel better, then yeah, I think you don't have to worry about that. Like, I don't know. I think that we just keep our faith personal, and then it's not anything that really has to change the status quo. And then you can just be frustrated about, I don't know, whatever lame personal sin you have going on, like me getting frustrated with my kids, or, you know, I don't know, the teenage boy that's just constantly masturbating. Like, yeah, it's pretty easy to just find those little things that are, affecting your life and not think about the larger implications of big sin and how or big injustices. Like, so I don't know. I think that we need to really just change the way we view Christianity, the way we view the gospel or Jesus' message. And it's not like it should take a big leap, in my opinion, but, you know, if your faith isn't causing you or leading you to care more deeply about your neighbor or your enemy or the poor, the marginalized, then what's the point? What is it doing? Jesus wasn't here coming to just be nice to people. He came to make a new world, and we're not going to make a new world being all concerned about random sexual ethics. Like, that's not, in my opinion, I don't think that's really going to change much. I don't
Yeah.
think it has changed much.
Yeah, and I do want to mention too. I know we kind of run back to sexual ethics as kind of a shorthand for this personalized focus, and I mean I think that's because it is in a big way here in the American church, and maybe that's a podcast episode for another day. I think as we wrap up, because we both have lives to get back to and duties to attend to. Just want to thank you again if you are still here listening to us. We really appreciate it. Really, recognize, hey, we've got a limited amount of time, and so you choosing to spend some of that with us it means a lot to us. We will hopefully be back soon. It is the holidays here, and we are both traveling and like we said, dealing with stuff like that. So I'm not sure when we will get back with our next episode, hopefully soon. Until then, we hope that you have a great holiday season. You're able to take care of yourself. And if you celebrate Christmas still, have a Merry Christmas. And if you don't, just hope that, again, you have a good holiday season and that you get some joy out of the season. So we'll see you later.
Bye.